Out front now, retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who served as commanding general of U.S. Army Europe, Alina Polyakova, Russian foreign affairs expert, and Max Seddon, the Moscow bureau chief for the Financial Times. Max, let me start with you. The reporting from the Financial Times, obviously so central to the story today. The new reporting that Trump asked Zelensky on a call whether he could hit Moscow, whether he could hit St. Petersburg. What more are you learning, Max, about the call and how this came about?
Well, really, Aaron, this was all precipitated by the call that Trump had with Putin the day before. And from what we understand, it went very badly from Trump's perspective. He was very unhappy with Putin, who basically told him that he wasn't interested in the various deals that Trump was trying to put on the table, sending his envoy Steve Witkoff to meet Putin several times, and he was going to press on with his offensive and keep pushing to win the war, the invasion of the Ukraine that he started 3 years ago, until he achieves what he refers to as the initial goals have all been accomplished. And this seems to have frustrated Trump so much that he called Zelensky the very next day, and that is what led to this announcement. So what you're really seeing is months of gradual frustration building up that Trump had with Putin, to the point where it was just a few months ago, it looked like the U.S. was taking Russia's side in the war, and now it's agreed to arm Ukraine to cause more pain to Russia. It's a real complete 180 from Trump, and it seems to have been triggered by his personal relationship with Putin going sour.
Which is fascinating, I guess, of the great man theory of history, that it is their personal relationship that could have turned this, if it turned. General, I mentioned those missiles that could go just for 200 miles, that would put 30 Russian air bases within striking distance of Ukraine. That obviously would be dramatic in and of itself. That doesn't even assume that they would get those offensive weapons that would allow them to strike as far as Moscow or St. Petersburg. What would such weapons do to this war?
Well, I imagine, Aaron, that the Ukrainians would go after those factories that make the Shahed drones. They would go after airfields from which Russian aircraft take off and launch Kinzhal missiles against innocent Ukrainian civilians. This is the concept of killing the archer instead of trying to intercept all the arrows. So if you can hit the place from which these attacks originate, that's much more efficient than trying to shoot down hundreds of drones every night.
So I like that analogy, the archer, not the arrows. Alina, we heard Russian state TV, Julia Javis had highlighted the clip, right, where Solovov says already this is nuclear war. Basically, Trump can say that he's not the one saying this, but we know that's lies. America, this happens. We're going nuclear. And another one of Putin's top TV propagandists, Alexander Sladkov, posted on social media, and I quote him, Alina, "Trump's trying to scare us with missiles. It is Trump who should be scared. Which is in Western Ukraine, into Hiroshima and Nagasaki." So, Alina, there's no ambiguity here. It's straight to nuclear war and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Why are we hearing those nuclear threats right now?
Well, Aaron, I think it's very obvious why we're hearing those is because even though publicly Russian officials are pretending they don't care what the U.S. president says or what the United States does in its support for Ukraine or putting economic pressure on Russia, of course they care. And one telltale sign for that is when we see these kinds of nuclear threats that are being funneled through Russian state media, the favorite propagandists you just mentioned. It means that inside the Kremlin, they feel very insecure and very uncertain about what the United States might do. And I think they feel like they are probably misplaying their hand with President Trump, where they had a huge opportunity to probably strike a deal, and they've missed out on that. And now they're probably afraid that President Trump will take action this time. And I think this is a good thing.
So, Max, when you talk about the relationship between Trump and Putin going sour is perhaps what sparked this seeming 180 turn. There was another thing Trump said today that stood out. I wanted to give you a chance to put some context on it. He said, okay, sure, 50-day deadline, but he's on, quote unquote, nobody's side. I mean, how do you interpret that, Max? I mean, obviously, just to be clear here, there is a side that invaded Ukraine and caused the largest land war in Europe since World War II and has fought it unrelentingly ever since, right? That is the side of Putin. So when Putin hears he's on nobody's side. Does that mean anything to him?
I think it just shows to Putin that Trump's approach to this has been really, really chaotic, and it's not been very clear to anybody throughout this process what the U.S. actually wants to accomplish, other than just having any kind of deal just for the sake of saying that you have the deal, and regardless of how well it holds up. We saw that with the initial deal that Steve Witkoff struck in Gaza, which did not exactly stand the test of time. And for Putin, by contrast, even though you have these two leaders of world historical significance, and there's this great affinity between them, Putin is someone who is thinking very much in the perspective of history and great powers. And this is what seems to have led him to decide that he was going to choose winning the war over trying to do some sort of rapprochement with the U.S. because you see that Trump is very unpredictable. He can do a 180 on a dime, and what Lavrov said was not exactly inaccurate there. And it may only be around for a few years, whereas Putin is thinking in terms of centuries, in terms of what he wants to accomplish in Ukraine.
Right, and perhaps why even a peace deal on the terms that Trump had offered him, which was pretty much anything anyone would have thought he wanted, wasn't good enough. General Hodges, I know that 2 weeks, 6 months, 50 days, who knows what it is, but right now it's 50 days. How much damage can Putin do in 50 days, given where the war is?
Well, we are seeing tonight, right now, what they can do. And this attack tonight is another example of how little respect the Kremlin has for the United States and for the administration. And so when our president says, in 50 days, then Putin hears, okay, I've got 7 weeks where I can do whatever the hell I want, not worry about sanctions or anything happening, and knowing that it'll probably get kicked down the road again as well. So 50 days, I mean, imagine Ukrainian civilians getting killed every night for the next now 7 weeks. And the problem, Aaron, is that these policies, these dates, these numbers, these weapons, none of them are connected to a strategy. The president is repeating the same mistake that the last president made, which is they are not clearly identifying the objective. What is it we're trying to accomplish in Ukraine? Negotiations are not an end state. A ceasefire is not an end state. What are we trying to accomplish? And of course, the end state should be that Russia lives inside its own borders.
All right. So, Alina, when Lavrov says, talking about how the time frame keeps changing, we've been through all this, and Medvedev says Russia doesn't care, but it sounds like they do care.
Well, they absolutely care. The United States, for the Kremlin, for Mr. Putin, has been, enemy number one since Putin basically came to power. So there's no question, to my mind, and I think to most people, that everything the United States does is watched very, very closely. And I think when Lavrov makes that comment, he's not just talking about Trump and the inconsistencies that we've seen with this president on various issues. He's talking about the full scope of U.S. presidents, where we have, reset here, we have, more of a assertive response there, and it's just constant back and forth. And I think the truth is that we haven't had a policy or strategy on Russia for a very, very long time, since basically the end of the Cold War. And Putin's sitting back and he says, next time I'll have a different guy, and I'm still going to be here, exactly to Max's point.
Right. Still there until, of course, he isn't. Thank you all so much as that attack unfolds in Kharkiv as we speak.